something that's very much building up at the present moment. I'm quite certain that the United States, having put its shoulder firmly to the wheel of supporting Ukraine, will ensure that the Ukrainian military has got the expertise, the equipment, and the ammunition that it needs to be able to see this counteroffensive and other moves in the war to a successful conclusion.
Right. So look at it then. This situation at a critical stage in the conflict. It's always a critical stage in the conflict. But at this particular point, what sort of kit, as a general, can you tell us is most important today, day to day, in the fighting as it goes on? Obviously, these weapons have achieved objectives. They've hit bases deep inside Crimea, for example. They can be very, very accurate. But it's not just about missiles like HIMARS, is it?
No, what we've got to talk about and focus on is a campaign, in this case, a counter-offensive campaign, which will have deep operations, close operations, and rear operations as part of that overall campaign. Now, the artillery that we're talking about is really important as far as the conduct of those deep operations are concerned. And it may even have been that the attacks on the Saki air base and more recently on the ammunition dump a few days ago are all part of the deep operations, shaping the circumstances, shaping the environment for this counteroffensive. Now, I'm not dodging your direct question, but in addition to that kind of artillery, what the Ukrainians need are sufficiently trained numbers of infantrymen and armored soldiers in order to be able to conduct their close operations to really press home the advantage in a counteroffensive. And as far as this is concerned, it's unsurprising that countries like the United Kingdom, in the United Kingdom, are training a large number of Ukrainian infantrymen to be ready for this counteroffensive when it starts. Now, people have been talking about this counteroffensive for quite a while and rather wondering, why hasn't it happened? Well, it's taking far longer to put the necessary pieces in place so that the Ukrainians have got a comprehensive, deep, close, and rear element to their counteroffensive campaign so that it can be successful. And I think it may well be that we don't see this counteroffensive really coming off until the autumn or possibly even into the winter or next spring. This war, to the disappointment of Putin many months ago, and I'm afraid the international media many months ago, is not done and dusted in 6 weeks. It's not going to be done and dusted, well, in 6 days, not in 6 weeks or 6 months.
Yes.
This is going to go on for really quite a long time. And at the present moment, there's something of an operational pause going on while the Russians are trying to reinforce their positions around Kherson. They've slowed down their attacks in parts of the Donbass, and the Ukrainians are getting themselves ready to mount this counteroffensive. And it'll come, and it'll be very bloody, very tough when it does.
Yes.
And it'll be very interesting to watch.
Well, and intense from everything you're saying, everything that we're hearing, and in what will at times become really quite close quarters fighting. Well, morale becomes very important, doesn't it? And from all we've seen, morale among Ukrainian forces seems to be pretty good, certainly compared to what we hear of the Russian military. But so does training, and I guess that's where what's being offered by this country becomes so very important.
Well, training is really important because training builds confidence in soldiers, and if you've got confident soldiers, then you've got soldiers with high morale, and we're certainly seeing that amongst the Ukrainians. I think also, as far as morale is concerned, the rate of casualties amongst the Russian troops is alarmingly high. We probably, it's unconfirmed reports, but in the area in the order of 50 to 60,000 dead, and multiples of 2 or 3 times of that wounded, missing, or prisoner. In the case of the Ukrainians, what was about 200 fatalities a day during the height of fighting in the Donbass for Severodonetsk and places like that has slowed off to around about 25 or 30 or so a day. Now, that has quite a significant beneficial effect on morale. But training is pretty key to this. But so I'm afraid it's time and getting an operation properly planned with proper command and control to bring all the elements together to be successful. And I think it's also worth pointing out, John, that Kherson is a large city occupied by the Russians without much fighting in the early months of the campaign. So unlike Mariupol, it hasn't been smashed up. Unlike Severodonetsk, it hasn't been smashed up. And the Russians would like to see Kherson remaining intact. After all, they're trying to run an election there or a referendum there to get the people, such as they are, to say they want to be pro-Russian. So the Ukrainians, in mounting the counter-offensive there, will undoubtedly use a lot of long-range artillery, long-range fires, but they will probably be very wary about committing their recently trained and highly valuable infantrymen into house to house, fight street by street fighting. They're more likely to stand off and encircle and lay an old-fashioned type siege to somewhere like Kherson.
Yeah, give me your perspective on the human dimension of all of this. How challenging is it, Richard, and how much time does it take to take, let us call them a raw recruit, somebody who might have been used to teaching in a classroom or sitting in an office until very recently, to take that person and turn them into a workable fighting unit as a piece of training?
Well, the young men and women that we recruit into the British Army to be combat infantrymen, they require 6 months of intensive training. Now, I don't know how long a training period and program that we are giving the Ukrainians, but I suspect that we are giving them several months training and not just a few weeks training, because we know what the Ukrainian army wants to do with these infantrymen, and that is to fight a successful counteroffensive operation. And it would be criminal on our part if we just gave them a few days and weeks of training and said, there you are, you're trained sufficiently, go off and get killed. That would be irresponsible on our part. So I'm going to guess that we need to train those people for 3 to 6 months to give them the chance of being able to fight professionally and confidently and competently on the battlefield of tomorrow.
And when it comes to preparing a soldier capable of fighting maybe far behind enemy lines, because that fighting is going to be very important. It is already very important. That is a much bigger job of training altogether, isn't it?
Well, it is. Of course it is. And the way our special forces are selected, they are selected from soldiers who volunteer, of our experience over a number of years of experience within our own armed forces, and then they go through a rigorous selection process. Now, I don't think the Ukrainians have got the time and the luxury to do that. I think that they're using some of their better soldiers, giving them better training, and it does beg the interesting question as to what was behind that attack at the Saki airfield and the attack on the munitions dump quite recently. Was it specially trained sabotage teams, or was it, and personally I think it's what I'm about to suggest, is that the Ukrainians have found a way of adapting some of their HARM anti-aircraft missiles and putting them on MiG-29 aircraft and flying them quite close to these targets, and then releasing these anti-aircraft missiles, which hone in unerringly onto the targets to which they've been aimed. And I think that's probably what we've seen in these very long-range attacks in Crimea. Could be sabotage, but I think there'd be very brave saboteurs who did that. Much more likely that some kind of standoff device, and not the ATACMS, which the Americans have pledged not to give such long-range missiles to the Ukrainians.
It's a really interesting bit of speculation there. It could be, you say, about just innovation, making what they've got go even further. I mean, goodness me, the resourcefulness of the Ukrainian fighters.
Well, indeed. I mean, we mustn't forget the Ukrainians have got quite a well-developed armed industry of their own. They're intelligent, well-educated people, quite capable in extremis. And after they've been in extremis now for 6 months of war, to adapt some of the things they've been given, some of the things they've manufactured, some of the things they've already got into new and novel ways of conducting operations. And I think adapting a MiG-29 to carry a HARM missile is quite possible. There may be other technical experts who'll think that this old infantryman general called Dannatt might be singing through his hat. But I actually think it's really quite possible they've done that.